Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? Well, a little while ago, one of my viewers, CloseingStraw97, asked me a really good question. And, I said, yeah, I'm going to answer, and I decided I was going to put it in a video, and it just took me a while, so I'm really kind of late with this, so I apologize. But he asked me, what is Mars like? And specifically Mars that I'm using for Lamentations of the Martian Princess. And I've actually made a video response to CloseingStraw97 before, when he was asking me about the Antha, some of the creatures there, and it came up with this great thumbnail for that video. Isn't that awful? I look like a freaking idiot. But that's what YouTube chose as the thumbnail for that video. But this video has nothing to do with this ridiculous thumbnail. So, figured I'd answer because it's a really interesting question, and I wanted to talk about it because also just talk about a little bit how I'm running that game, how it's different than some of the other ways I talk about running games, just what I'm doing with that, because it's a channel about me, so what the heck. So, we're using Lamentations of the Flame Princess. That's the system. And I remember getting inspired to run something, some kind of sword and planet, let's do something on Mars while I was on vacation, and I finally had some time to read this book, Hollow Earth Expedition, Revelations of Mars. Really cool expansion book for Hollow Earth Expedition. Just like awesome stuff in here. And I still definitely want to run some real, honest-to-goodness Hollow Earth Expedition using this, but I got really intrigued and pumped and jazzed about doing some kind of sword and planet type stuff. And I was talking to some guys, and some of them were already interested in playing Lamentations of the Flame Princess. I kind of pitched this idea of doing something on Mars. I put like an interest post, and there were a few people that were interested. Two other guys are actually able to join, and so Todd and Dell joined. Jose and Eloy, and our players were our group was born, so to speak. But we talked a lot about what Mars is going to be like, and the session 0 and the whole idea, and they contributed a bunch of ideas. And I already talked about the idea. I almost used a lot of stuff from this, but I decided no, I'm not going to really just completely steal all this stuff. And I imported a bunch of sci-fi races from some of my favorite sci-fi races and kind of made this amalgam. But speaking of importing stuff, like I said, I'm really jazzed to play Hollow Earth Expedition using Revelations of Mars. But theoretically, I could have just imported all this stuff and kind of used this setting and just changed the system. Just like I was talking to another commenter of mine, I forget who actually asked the question, so I'm really sorry. But when I just did that video yesterday, unboxing Satan's Kingdom, or Satan's Playground, man, I'm a terrible friend. Terrible at remembering what I actually just did. But that expansion for All for One, Regime Diabolique, and it somebody asked me, it's set in 30 Years' War, Germany. And, 30 Years' War, Germany is Satan's Playground. I just had to look. 30 Years' War, Germany, well, Lamentations of the Flame Princess. Wiki does such a great job with all that stuff and just with all the setting, flavor. Now I'm going way off topic. In that, in Satan's Playground, that you could definitely use all that information and stuff and use it for Lamentations of the Flame Princess if you wanted to. Just change the system. So, it's good expansion books, good source books that allow you to take all those ideas and use it with something else if you want to. I really enjoy when they do. To me, that's a really good one, and just they're so gripping. And so, anyhow, but this video ain't about that. So, what is Mars like anyway? Well, here I got this big giant coffee table book with no coffee table to put it on. Woe is me. Let's take a look. What is Mars like? There we go. There it is. That's what Mars is really like. Kind of bleak actually when it comes right down to it. And I still love books like this. When I was a kid, I wanted to be an astronomer. I wanted to be a paleontologist actually. And actually really wanted to be an entomologist, but all this stuff sort of fascinating me. Here's a good shot of Olympus Mons. Just fascinating stuff. No. I'm not going to bore you with too much of this, but what is Mars really like? I think we have a picture here of what the surface of Mars is like, because that's what Closing Straw was kind of getting at. And I remember looking at all the Mariner pictures and some Time Life books or something that my parents had, or whatever it was. I remember when those things landed. I'm old. But yeah, this is what the surface of Mars looks like. Pretty bleak. Pretty awful. So that's not what our Mars looks like. Because that's part of what Closing Straw asked. Is is it this really cold desert? What does the armor look like? What are the people like? Well, all kinds of stuff. Just trying to get a better picture of what, this world that I had created, that our players, had helped me create. What was it like? And when he's watching, when the few people actually watched that game, what is this really like? And so, it's not exactly like that. You know, the idea, this is Sword and Planet. You know, Dell actually pointed me in the direction of this book, Warriors of the Red Planet, which I got prior to starting the game, and I stole a bunch of ideas out of here. It's Night Owl Workshop. It's Al Krambach and Thomas Denmark. Pretty cool little OSR game, you know, that you can play Sword and Planet type stuff with. So I just stole a whole bunch of junk out of here. And it has some really good ideas and guidance for running Sword and Planet, which I'm still trying to find my voice, because that's not a genre that I'm super familiar with running, and it's not a genre that I've read enough. You know, I've watched a lot of movies, I've seen stuff, but it's something that I really need to go back and really examine some more, because it's a lot of fun. But I still haven't answered the question. So Mars is a dying planet. It's not actually dead. You know, Mars, of course, is a dead planet now, and it's, you know, we think it might have been lush at one point. Maybe it did have some kind of life and had an atmosphere, and of course, it's just not dense enough to hold an atmosphere. It doesn't have that big core, you know, the metallic core that the Earth does. And I'm going way off topic again because that's real life type stuff. The point is, we're not doing real life. We're doing alternate reality. You know, we're throwing the laws of physics out the window. Sword and Planet is about the fact that this has a breathable atmosphere. Maybe there's some crazy creatures. Maybe there's you know, some purple lakes of some kind of mysterious lava. You know, all those tropes, you know, from those great Sword and Planet, you know, outer space science fiction stories. You know, things from the golden age of science fiction, where you really had to do a lot of suspension of disbelief. But this Mars is a dying planet. That's kind of the vibe I wanted to have with it. So, you know, where the humans live, you know, where the cities of something like Vesta and Paragon are, they're close to the equator. It's part of the planet which is really starting to dry up, so it is more desert-like. I was able to bring in something like a sandstorm, because it's you know, it's dying, but it's not completely dead. There are lush areas in Mars. There are areas of Mars which are, you know, much more Earth-like, and you know, part of the vibe I wanted to have with that was that you know, these people could explore and find other areas. In fact, part of the vibe I went for with Mars, as we were talking about it, was, if any of you have read the old Dungeon Masters, not the Dungeon Masters guide, but the stuff from Dragon Magazine, stuff with Grumsh. You know, this is original stuff I read years and years ago, but it always struck me that the story of Grumsh, this god of the orcs, you know, looked at the world, looked at where all the fantasy races, you know, the dwarves and the elves and the humans were going to live, and then he took this spear, his big spear, and he just whacked these areas of the earth and caused like big chasms and wastelands, and said, my people will live in all these places. So essentially, what I was telling my players was, humans are kind of like the orcs. They get the leftovers that all the other races, the places the other races will not live, because they're just too inhospitable. So that's where the characters started out. They started out in Mars 1, and all of a sudden, you know, due to time travel and distortions and everything else, something happened. Somebody went back in the past, changed something, and now they're on Mars 2. So I had to completely reinvent the world. So now it's different. What does the armor look like? Well, you know, I just had a discussion with my players a little while ago. It's kind of like, what do you think it looks like? Which is part of, you know, what I want to talk about here in a video that's probably too long, is the idea that I'm not being terribly descriptive, and it's on purpose. I want these players to kind of fill in the blanks with what they think Mars looks like, with what they think the armor looks like, with what they think the people look like. I have kind of purposefully not gone into big, lengthy descriptions about what the cities look like. All that kind of stuff. I've left it kind of vague. If anything, the city of Vesta, where they started out, in case you care, the name's not important. The idea was, it was almost like Conan the Barbarian-ish, sort of like this desert city. So I kind of wanted to have that sort of like, you know, weird like Shatazar, you know, vibe. But in terms of anything else, like what makes it kind of really Martian, other than the fact that there might be some ray guns and what have you, I want the players to kind of fill in the gaps. And that's something I like to do, not all the time, but it's a real favorite technique or way of playing, where I just don't supply an awful lot of description. Or when I play with the Game Master, I kind of like that vibe every once in a while, but they don't supply an awful lot of description. They use, as Same Old G was just talking about in his Snow Don't Tell video, just some key words. You know, let our imaginations fill in all the gaps. And maybe it looks different to each player around the table, but the salient points we can all agree on. So we all kind of, our shared imagination agrees on the really important things, like where is this rock? You know, who is this person? You know, how tall is this tree? you know, for purposes of some kind of actions or, you know, game mechanics or what have you. But what it really looks like, all the little nuances, all the details, what does this armor really look like? You know, I kind of like the idea that this kind of lives in the various players' imaginations, and we, you know, we can say certain things every once in a while and crystallize stuff, but it's not quite so. You know, I don't sit there and show them a picture or just drone on for like 15 minutes explaining what things look like. So if, you know, Closing Straw is a little confused about what things look like or what have you, it's because I haven't been that descriptive. But Mars itself, they are in this kind of desert area, for lack of a better word, and perhaps they'll move into one of the more lush areas and find some more stuff out. And then, you know, we'll find that Mars is a much more vibrant world than the humans actually knew or imagined. The fact that Mars is right next to Jupiter right now is impossible. We have completely thrown physics out the window. You know, bad things would happen, but we're using that Sword and Planet vibe. The other thing I'm doing in this game, if you've made it this far, is I'm kind of playing it fast and loose with reality. I have ideas of what's going to happen. I'm doing a lot of improv. Same old G would probably love this. And it goes completely against what I've said in a lot of my other videos. I have some basic ideas of what's actually true, but I'm kind of, you know, seeing where the players actually go. I'm playing a little bit fast and loose with some of the details and particulars, and so some of it I'm remaining absolutely true to my original conception, and I'm not changing things to suit to my whim. But in other areas, you know, I have changed reality. Not because the player said or because of the rule of cool or whatever, but just I've had some more time to think of things. And sometimes just between sessions, something occurs to me. It's like, oh, well, that would be kind of interesting. I kind of like this idea. Maybe sometimes it is a rule of cool. Let's see. What if this were actually true? Oh, I finally made a connection here and there, you know, between these two things. It is something that I don't know if this is exactly what Anthony gets at sometimes. Like a lot of times, you, as a game master, you play a lot of the game in your head in between sessions. You think about things, you make some more connections. And I think partially it's what he's talking about. But I am also playing a little more fast and loose with my concepts and ideas. I have changed a couple points here and there. But anyhow, I'm not sure if that answered any of Closing Straw's question. But that's kind of what Mars is like. It is not based in reality. It is not super frigid cold. It is, if anything, right now a little hot. But it is a dying world. It is a world that is slowly running out of water. That's the biggest. That's the biggest thing that's happening. And that's part of the whole vibe I wanted to have, where the god of the world, this god Bela, is now in a struggle for control of the world with this god Anu, who people see as some kind of destroyer, somebody that wants to take over this planet. What does that really mean? Well, I know what it means. But, and that's stuff I haven't actually changed, mostly. Although, once again, come up with some cool, interesting ideas for that as well. I've improved on my own ideas. So anyhow, really long video. Tell you that Mars is nothing like what Mars is really like. It's much more Sword and Planet, which, you know, I like. The end.